The rain had already begun to fall over the ruins of the Ardennes forest by the time John Hale's name vanished from every known ledger, erased as though the soil itself had swallowed him. The year was 1944, and Europe was a vast, trembling wound, its borders shifting daily under the weight of armies and whispered orders. Hale moved through it like a ghost long before he became one, an OSS operative trained to slip between shadows, to listen without listening, to leave no trace except the faintest disturbance in the cold air behind him. When he disappeared during an operation whose true purpose no surviving document dared to name, his absence was recorded only in the hush that followed. Officially he had died in action, but those who had worked beside him knew better. Men like Hale did not simply die. They disappeared into the cracks nations refused to admit existed. His file was sealed and buried in an archive that required 4 signatures, 2 ciphers, and a key that no longer matched any known lock. The war ended. Generations passed. New enemies rose, old alliances crumbled, and his name faded into a whisper found only in half-rotted field diaries and a single postcard that arrived decades too late to be understood. No one expected to hear of him again, not in any form, not in any century that claimed to have outgrown the hunger of secrets. Yet in 2023, an intern cataloging declassified OSS materials stumbled upon a sealed compartment inside a steel cabinet that had been emptied years earlier. The lock was fused, as though melted by heat, though no scorch marks marred the metal around it. Inside lay a single mission report. At the top of the first page, written in a hand that trembled with exhaustion or terror, was a name that had not been spoken aloud since the final winter of the war: John Hale. The report should not have existed. It was dated 2 weeks after Hale's disappearance, authored by an officer who, according to military records, had already been dead for 4 days by the time he supposedly wrote it. The ink had not faded. The paper smelled faintly of cold earth, as though it had been hidden in the ground, shielded from time's itself. The intern who found it claimed the air around the report felt wrong, as though the temperature dropped several degrees whenever the pages were disturbed. She spoke of hearing faint scraping noises in the walls of the archive that stopped the moment the report was moved from its compartment. She quit her job 2 days later and refused to return to the building, leaving behind only a brief note with 3 words: "Don't trust history." What unsettled investigators most was not the existence of the report, but the way Hale's name appeared in it, not as a subject or a casualty, as the author. At the bottom of the last page, a signature matched to him with near-perfect certainty, but the mission described in the report was one he could never have written about, a mission undertaken after the date of his confirmed disappearance. The handwriting was undeniably his, yet there were strange inconsistencies, strange pressure patterns in the ink, odd repetitions that suggested the writing hand may not have moved entirely on its own. Some lines wavered, slanted as though written in motion or under duress. Others were perfectly steady, the formation of each letter disturbingly precise. The report described events that could not have occurred, places that did not exist on any wartime map, and individuals whose identities resisted all attempts at verification. There were coordinates that led to forest clearings with trees older than cartography, rivers that no longer flowed and possibly never had. There were references to a structure Hale called the listening chamber, though no architectural record matched its design. In the margins, he had written fragmented warnings: "Do not follow my path. Do not seek the door." Some sentences ended abruptly, ink trailing into jagged scratches, as though the pen had been torn from his grasp mid-stroke. And amid that cold, unsettling mystery, one detail repeated again and again, buried between coded lines and desperate pleas. Someone was following him, or something. Hale wrote the word thing only once, then crossed it out with such force the paper nearly tore. He replaced it with presence, but even that seemed too vague, too merciful for what he hinted at. Whatever shadow moved behind him had no allegiance, no origin, no name. It was simply described as older than war. Before we go any deeper into the forest of Hale's final testimony, I want to know something from you watching this. Where are you watching this video from tonight? Let me know in the comments, and as we descend further into this forgotten mission, stay close. Strange things have been known to happen to those who listen too long to stories that were never meant to be told. The report continued in a tone that grew progressively fragmented, as though the writer was slipping further into a darkness he could neither see nor articulate. Hale spoke of an encounter in a farmhouse near the Luxembourg border, abandoned except for the remnants of a radio transmitter still warm to the touch. He heard footsteps upstairs, though the floorboards were undisturbed. He saw his breath frost in the air despite the early autumn warmth. He mentioned a window that reflected not his own face, but a version of it marked by exhaustion and years he had not yet lived. The reflection moved a fraction slower than he did, lagging behind as though struggling to remember how to mimic him. Near the halfway point of the report, the handwriting changed subtly, becoming sharper and more angular. Analysts later claimed the difference was consistent with someone writing in near-total darkness while using their non-dominant hand. Hale wrote of finding a bunker dug into a hillside, unmarked on any map, its entrance sealed from the inside. The silence in the tunnel was so complete, he could hear the slow pulse of his own blood. Yet there were footprints in the dust, fresh, leading deeper into the earth. He followed them until the passage ended in a chamber lit only by the faint glow of phosphorescent moss. In the center of the room stood a wooden chair, still warm, as though someone had been sitting in it just moments before he arrived. But the dust around it was untouched. He described hearing breathing that was not his own, slow, deliberate, measured. But every time he turned, it stopped. He whispered into the darkness. He received whispers in return, but they were not echoes. They were answers. At the very end of the report's first section, Hale included a final note, written in ink that had bled slightly more than the rest, as though the paper was damp when he wrote it. If you are reading this, it means I failed. It means the chamber opened. It means the presence has passed beyond me. Do not search for me. Do not record what you learn. Those who carry my name forward invite it to return. The archivists who handled the document refused to touch it again. Some claimed they heard Hale's words continuing on the page, even after they stopped reading. Others spoke of a faint vibration in the report, like the rhythm of a distant engine, or the pulse of something buried too deep to identify. Security cameras inside the archive captured strange distortions the night the document was moved to a secure vault, frames flickering as though something passed too quickly across the lenses for human eyes to register. As this first descent into Hale's rediscovered final testimony reaches its end, take a moment to steady yourself. There are 5 more depths still ahead, and each grows darker than the last. If you want to stay with me as we continue unraveling the silence around this vanished OSS agent, subscribe to the channel. There are stories like this that should never be forgotten, no matter how fiercely history tries to bury them. In the weeks following John Hale's disappearance, the OSS maintained the illusion of control. Officially, his mission file was classified as incomplete due to communications failure during hostile engagement. But among those who had worked under Major Preston Ward, Hale's direct superior, the phrase quickly became synonymous with something else entirely. They called it the Black Fog Protocol, the quiet removal of names, the soft erasure of lives that had touched something they were never meant to see. No body, no grave, only silence, sealed in triplicate. Ward was the last person to have received Hale's final transmission, a message that lasted exactly 6 seconds before the line cut out. The audio recording, preserved on brittle magnetic tape, carried no voice, only a rhythmic pattern of static that, when slowed down, resembled breathing. Ward had listened to it for hours, convinced he could hear words buried inside the interference, syllables distorted beyond comprehension. When he sent the tape to Washington, it vanished en route. The courier was found 2 days later near Reims, his vehicle intact, the parcel missing. His eyes were open, but both pupils were clouded white, as though burned from within. The coroner's report mentioned severe exposure to unknown electromagnetic interference, though the weather that day had been clear and calm. The report was sealed before it reached the chain of command. The OSS's European headquarters began to treat the Hale case like a contagion. Personnel who had reviewed his mission documents were reassigned or discharged without explanation. Ward was recalled to London for debriefing but never arrived. His quarters in Luxembourg were left undisturbed for 3 months before a new operative dared to inventory them. Inside, they found maps pinned to the walls, connected by black thread converging on a single location in eastern Belgium. A dense patch of woodland marked only by one handwritten note. He's still there. Over time, the memory of Hale faded even among his comrades, replaced by the pressing machinery of post-war reconstruction. But the forest did not forget. Local villagers told stories of lights seen flickering beneath the trees, of strange equipment humming beneath the soil, of soldiers who wandered too far and returned unable to speak. Decades later, hikers reported hearing faint Morse code in their radios when passing through the same region, even with no signal reception. The code repeated the same sequence over and over, dots and dashes spelling HALE. In 1963, during a NATO training exercise near the same area, a patrol unit stumbled upon a partially collapsed bunker that did not appear on any map. Inside, the air was unnaturally still, as though sealed by vacuum. The walls were carved with English letters, though the hand that carved them seemed unsteady, desperate. They read, "The Presence. Feeds on memory." A rusted field satchel was recovered, containing fragments of documents and one Polaroid photograph that could not have existed in 1944. The film type had not yet been invented. The image showed a man in an OSS uniform standing beside a forest clearing, eyes turned toward the camera. His face was partially obscured by light flare, but the lower half, the mouth, the jawline, matched Hale's wartime identification photos with unsettling precision. Forensic analysts dismissed the image as an anachronistic hoax, yet the photograph itself was physically aged, the edges brittle, as though it had indeed been buried for decades. Some claimed that the photograph was part of an elaborate psychological experiment conducted during the early years of the Cold War, designed to test how operatives reacted to impossible evidence. Others whispered of something older, something carried forward from Hale's final mission, an unfinished exchange between man and the unknowable. Whatever truth lay beneath those theories, the result was the same. The Hale case was quietly suppressed again. Files were pulled, evidence destroyed, and those who asked too many questions were reminded that not all ghosts belong to the dead. But the sealed mission report discovered in 2023 broke that silence with surgical precision. Experts from multiple intelligence agencies, historians, and cryptographers were called to examine it. They quickly discovered that the document contained layered codes, not traditional ciphers, but sequences of words whose placement followed an unnatural rhythm, as though designed to be heard rather than read. When the text was analyzed sonically, using software to convert its letter frequencies into sound patterns, the result was chilling. It produced a waveform nearly identical to the breathing pattern recorded in Hale's final transmissions nearly 80 years earlier. Investigators replayed the sound in an isolated laboratory chamber. What they did not expect was that the waveform contained an echo, a secondary signal buried beneath the primary one. When enhanced, it revealed a faint human voice repeating a single phrase: "It isn't over." By that point, every person who had handled the report had begun experiencing similar symptoms: insomnia, auditory hallucinations, an unshakable sense of being watched. One analyst claimed that each time he closed his eyes, he saw a face in the static, a man's face, expressionless, staring as if waiting for recognition. Another described dreams in which she stood in a darkened corridor, hearing footsteps behind her, but unable to turn. When she finally forced herself to look, she said she saw her own shadow detach from her feet and begin to move independently. She resigned 2 days later. The deeper the investigation went, the more impossible it became to separate truth from contagion. It was as if the report itself was alive, evolving, adapting, resisting analysis. At one point, the physical pages appeared to rearrange themselves. Paragraphs swapped positions overnight. When photographed, the text on certain pages blurred slightly, as though refusing to be captured. A security guard assigned to the vault claimed that during his night shift he could hear faint whispers coming from inside the sealed containment unit, though no recording device picked them up. He described the voices as calm, rhythmic, almost mechanical, like someone reading a report aloud in monotone. By November 2023, the Department of Defense ordered the report resealed and transferred to an undisclosed underground archive. A public statement labeled the entire affair an instance of mass misinterpretation, amplified by stress and online speculation. But a week later, an anonymous message was posted to a secure academic forum used by intelligence historians. It contained a single photograph, a scan of one page from the Hale report, overlaid with a timestamp: 2023, 11:07:02:44 a.m. The image quality was grainy, but clear enough to read a single line highlighted in red ink. The mission never ended because the war never truly stopped. Those words reignited every conspiracy, every buried fear that Hale's disappearance had not been an ending but a transition, from operative to something else entirely. The strange phenomena that followed the rediscovery of the report did not stop with the researchers. Across several intelligence communities, data servers began to experience irregularities on the same nights the document was accessed. Lines of encrypted text appeared in unrelated files, forming coherent sentences when decrypted. The first of these messages was brief: "Listening chamber open." The second was a string of numbers corresponding to a set of coordinates. The same forest in Belgium where Hale was last seen. When a reconnaissance drone was deployed to the site in December 2023, Its feed transmitted for exactly 13 minutes before cutting out. The last frame captured was of an open field surrounded by dead trees, with faint movement visible at the edge of the clearing. Analysts later confirmed that the movement was not caused by wind. Whatever it was standing still, yet slightly shifting, as though caught between frames of time. One of the intelligence officers overseeing the operation wrote in his final memo before retirement, "We opened something that had already been waiting. We didn't find Hale. We found the silence he left behind." Some say that silence still travels through frequencies, through cables, through the small pauses between transmissions that we call static. Some claim it listens back. Before we descend further into that silence, before the third revelation takes hold, take a moment, if you're drawn to stories like this, ones that thread darkness through history's blind spots. Remember to stay close to this channel. What comes next will reach deeper into Hale's final hours and into what the OSS was truly protecting when they buried his name. Snow was falling over the Ardennes the night John Hale sent his last message. The war was collapsing into chaos, front lines dissolving, villages shifting hands, the air dense with smoke and surrender. But Hale's orders did not follow any battle plan. His objective was simple on paper, impossible in practice. Locate a German research site hidden beneath an abandoned monastery near the border, retrieve whatever information it held, and destroy the structure. The intelligence report that sent him there was unsigned, routed through layers of encryption so dense, even his superior, Major Ward, admitted he could not trace its origin. Hale had performed impossible tasks before, but this mission felt different. There were no extraction coordinates, no secondary team, only him, a radio, and a coded phrase he was told to broadcast once the objective was complete. The chamber is sealed. He moved under the cover of darkness, his breath visible in thin ribbons as the cold bit through his coat. The monastery appeared through the trees like a wound in the night, its spires half collapsed, the bells silent. The main doors were chained from the outside, yet there were fresh footprints in the snow leading to a side entrance. Inside, the air carried the smell of iron and burnt ozone. The walls were lined with blackout curtains. Under the floorboards, something hummed, a low pulsing vibration that made his teeth ache. He followed it down a narrow staircase into the earth, flashlight flickering. The deeper he went, the warmer the air became. At the bottom of the stairs he found the first body. A German officer seated against the wall, eyes wide open, skin pale as wax. There were no wounds. His hand still gripped a radio headset, though the cord had been severed. Hale removed it and pressed it to his ear. No sound, only the faint static of open frequency. Yet beneath that static, he thought he heard breathing, the same pattern from his later transmission, the same cadence. The lower chamber was carved from stone, lined with rusted equipment and a row of metal doors marked only with numbers. On the floor, someone had drawn symbols, circles intersecting with lines, patterns repeating endlessly like mechanical constellations. Hale took photographs. Most came out blank. Only one showed anything distinct, a blurred figure standing at the edge of the frame, head turned away, face swallowed in shadow. In the center of the chamber was a door, not of metal or stone, but of wood, impossibly preserved. It pulsed faintly when light touched it, as though the grain itself breathed. Hale approached, radio trembling in his hand, and recorded a single note in his field journal. They built it around the sound. What followed remains one of the most contested sequences in intelligence history. The recovered pages of Hale's journal, partially burned, partially rewritten, describe hearing voices behind the door, not speaking, but remembering. He claimed the sound had weight, that it pressed against the skull like water, reshaping thought into echo. Then the door opened. No one knows what he saw. The last coherent lines in his journal read, "It's not German. It's not human. It listens." After that, the entries devolve into fragments. Single words repeated in uneven patterns: mirror, breath, return, seal. The radio transmission that reached Major Ward shortly after midnight contained only static, followed by the 6-second breathing pattern that would later define the case. Hours later, Allied scouts found the monastery reduced to rubble. Its substructure collapsed. They discovered traces of melted metal, but no signs of explosives. The ground still vibrated faintly, as if something deep beneath it was still moving. Hale was gone. For decades, what lay beneath that monastery remained a myth. But the 2023 discovery of his report changed that. Cross-referencing the coordinates mentioned in his notes with modern satellite scans revealed an anomaly under the forest floor, a geometric void too precise to be natural, approximately 30 meters wide, containing structures made of unknown material. Seismic readings indicated faint rhythmic pulses every 91 seconds, similar to the pattern of human respiration. By now, the pattern had become the centerpiece of every investigation. Hale's breathing appeared not only in his final transmission, but in multiple unrelated recordings across the decades. Cold War surveillance tapes, submarine sonar logs, even deep space probes returning audio anomalies. The same slow, steady rhythm, repeating across time and distance. When analyzed spectrally, researchers found the waveform carried embedded data. Binary sequences corresponding to fragmented English words. One message, reconstructed in 2023, read simply, "I am still below." The implications were unbearable. Some claimed Hale had become part of the phenomenon, his consciousness integrated into whatever mechanism lay beneath the earth. Others believed he had never died, merely crossed a threshold where time dissolved. A classified psychological profile released later that year included a chilling line from an unnamed official. The chamber did not consume him. It recorded him. That possibility became more tangible when the sealed report began exhibiting new anomalies. During its final review, technicians monitoring the vault's environmental sensors noticed spikes in electromagnetic activity precisely every time someone spoke Hale's name aloud. The spikes matched his 1944 signal frequency exactly. To test whether it was coincidence, a controlled experiment was conducted. Microphones placed around the report, recording continuous white noise. The results showed fluctuations that formed into recognizable speech patterns when filtered. The voice, faint but human, repeated, "Seal the chamber, seal the chamber." The scientists conducting the test refused to continue. Two of them suffered severe auditory hallucinations, claiming they could hear whispering through their walls at night. One described waking to see his reflection standing behind him in the mirror, moving half a second slower. He fled the country soon after. As word of the incident spread within classified circles, a decision was made. All research into the Hale case would cease, and the report would be permanently sealed in a location undisclosed to every living participant. Yet before that order took effect, a final encrypted email circulated through an internal network. It contained a transcript fragment from Hale's journal that had not been included in any official release. The text read, "To whoever finds this, understand that we were wrong about what the chamber held. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't technology. It was a boundary. We opened it because we thought knowledge was power, but what we found was hunger disguised as silence. And then beneath those lines, a final phrase written in capital letters. A warning and a plea. Do not listen for me." But of course, by the time that message surfaced, millions had already listened. The internet had transformed Hale's name into a mythos, and myths have a way of surviving their own suppression. Amateur radio operators began scanning the frequencies mentioned in his files. Within weeks, dozens claimed to have intercepted the same 6-second breathing pattern. Some dismissed it as hoax or atmospheric interference. Others insisted it was real. A few who recorded it said they heard something else embedded within the noise. Faint whispers, forming words that sounded disturbingly like coordinates. One of those operators disappeared in March 2024 after transmitting a live feed from a forest in Belgium. The last frame of his video showed the ground vibrating slightly beneath his feet, the sound of wind rising into something that was not quite wind, deeper, rhythmic, almost human. At this point, the line between history and haunting dissolved completely. The OSS, the war, the report, all became one continuum of silence threading through decades of secrecy. And through it all, Hale's name remained like a pulse. Faint, irregular, but persistent. Not dead, not alive, merely waiting. As the third descent into Hale's shadow ends, take a moment to breathe. If you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, do so now. Not out of curiosity, but because what follows will take us further than any record has dared to go. The next part will reveal what the OSS actually found beneath that monastery, and why some believe the war itself was only the cover story for something far older, something still breathing beneath our world. When Allied forces reached the ruins of the monastery in early 1945, their orders were simple. Recover what they could, seal what they couldn't. The structure had collapsed inward, the ground above it scorched yet unburned. Engineers found twisted rebar embedded in stone like veins of metal, as though the walls themselves had melted and solidified again. Beneath the rubble, they discovered a narrow passage that spiraled downward, lined with smooth stone blocks, unlike any architecture from the region. The deeper they descended, the more the air grew heavy, not from dust, but from something else, something that pressed against the lungs like deep water. The soldiers who entered that tunnel described hearing a low resonance, a pulse too steady to be mechanical. It vibrated in their bones, matching their own heartbeats, until they could no longer tell which rhythm belonged to them. Only 3 of the 11 men sent down returned to the surface. The others vanished somewhere below, their lights extinguished mid-communication. The survivors were incoherent, eyes wide, voices trembling. They spoke of corridors that bent where geometry should not, of footsteps that echoed out of sequence, of whispers that arrived before their own words. One of them repeated a single phrase over and over. "It remembers us," until he lost his voice completely. The surviving commander, Captain Milton Raines, ordered the entire site sealed with concrete and declared it unfit for further investigation. His final report was marked classified indefinite. For decades, that should have been the end of it. But in 1972, during NATO's expansion of underground communication cables across Belgium, construction crews broke into an uncharted cavity beneath the forest. The engineers described finding a chamber lined with inscriptions carved into the rock, symbols later identified as matching those drawn on the monastery floor in Hale's journal. Inside that chamber were remnants of machinery fused with organic matter, impossible to separate. Metal veins that appeared to grow from stone, as though the machinery itself had taken root. Instruments failed immediately upon entering. Compasses spun violently. Cameras malfunctioned. The foreman ordered the site sealed again within 24 hours. The official report filed it as unexploded ordnance hazard. It wasn't until 2023, after the rediscovery of Hale's mission report, that historians realized the coordinates of that 1972 chamber were identical to the ones Hale had mentioned nearly 80 years earlier. The chamber hadn't been destroyed in 1944. It had survived. When investigators overlaid the modern scans of the area with Hale's original hand-drawn map, they found a geometric pattern extending outward from the chamber's location, a perfect spiral expanding through the forest, following the paths of rivers and fault lines. The shape matched diagrams recovered from declassified German research files related to a program called Project Nachklang, or Project Reverberation. BOLI. Its stated purpose was the study of resonant frequencies within geological cavities capable of sustaining cognitive imprint. In simpler terms, they were experimenting with recording thought, not onto tape, but into the earth itself. The implications were horrifying. Hale hadn't been sent merely to destroy a Nazi research site. He'd been sent to contain something those scientists had awakened. The chamber wasn't a laboratory. It was a storage unit, or perhaps a tomb. The project's documents hinted at an artifact retrieved from Poland months before the monastery's collapse, described only as the listening core. No one knew its origin, only that it spoke when silence was complete. When Hale entered the monastery, the core was already active. His orders, seal the chamber, were an attempt to bury the phenomenon again before it could spread. But he opened it, and whatever was inside, whatever used that door as a mouth, began to listen back. In 2023, as investigators pieced these fragments together, seismic sensors around the Ardennes recorded a new pulse from beneath the forest. The rhythm matched the breathing pattern of Hale's final transmission. It lasted 7 minutes, then stopped. The next morning, an email circulated among the analysts working on the case. No sender, no metadata. It contained a single sentence. The chamber is no longer sealed. At the same time, strange signals began to appear across shortwave frequencies worldwide. Faint, rhythmic distortions buried in static, synchronized down to the millisecond. Amateur radio operators described hearing whispers embedded within them, sometimes in English, sometimes in languages no one could identify. One transmission, recorded on the night of November 18th, 2023, contained a message repeated 4 times. We found his voice beneath the earth. When the signal was inverted and slowed, analysts realized something disturbing. It wasn't a recording. It was live. The waveform displayed micro-fluctuations consistent with real-time respiration. It wasn't just mimicking Hale's breath pattern. It was breathing. The military classified the signal immediately, citing geological interference. But several leaks emerged within weeks, including audio files uploaded anonymously that spread rapidly online. Those who listened for extended periods reported a strange side effect. They began to dream of tunnels, of dripping stone walls, of a man whispering from somewhere just out of sight. Some said the dreams followed them into waking life. Flickers at the edges of mirrors, whispers in the hum of electricity. Psychologists attributed it to mass suggestion, but others began to connect the phenomenon to older legends of the Ardennes. Stories of hollow earths, of ancient resonant structures buried before written language. In those legends, there was always a guardian, a watcher bound by silence. Some versions called it der Zeuge, the witness. It was said to feed not on life, but on remembrance, surviving only through the act of being thought of. To forget it was to kill it. To speak its name was to call it back. Hale's mission, whether he knew it or not, might have been the last attempt to keep the witness asleep. What terrified modern analysts most was a passage discovered deep within Hale's report that had gone unnoticed until late 2023. Written in faint pencil, almost erased by time, it read, "They told me to seal the door, but no one asked what it was keeping out. By then, too many had read the report. Too many had spoken his name. Too many had listened to the recordings. Whatever was beneath that forest had begun to awaken. Sensors detected rising electromagnetic fields across the entire region, accompanied by deep, rhythmic tremors felt miles away. Local animals fled. Birds stopped nesting in the trees. And then one night, a series of low-frequency vibrations rippled through communication lines across Europe, cutting power in several sectors. The sound that accompanied the blackout was not thunder. It was breathing. In the aftermath, the Department of Defense classified all further data under Operation Stillwater. The official story was that a geological anomaly had disrupted communication networks. But off the record, researchers monitoring the signals claimed the pulse was spreading, faintly detectable now in oceanic depths, echoing through undersea cables, resonating with something vast and unseen. If the chamber had been a tomb, then something had escaped it. If it had been a recording, then it was now playing itself back. And somewhere in those endless pulses, a voice continued to whisper between the breaths. John Hale. As we draw this fourth descent to a close, the silence surrounding the Hale mystery is no longer silence at all. It is a kind of waiting, a slow inhalation before something unseen exhales across the world. If you're drawn deeper into this darkness, stay close. Like this video if you haven't yet. Each small act of acknowledgement keeps this story from fading, though sometimes it's safer to let things fade. Because in the next part, we'll explore the aftermath. What happened to those who tried to contain the chamber again, and why some believe Hale's name is more than a name. It's a signal. By early 2024, the Hale investigation had reached a point where even silence felt unstable. The forest in Belgium was cordoned off under the guise of an environmental hazard zone, patrolled by unmarked vehicles and temporary structures that appeared overnight and vanished by dawn. Locals spoke of hearing faint metallic droning beneath the ground, as if the earth itself had begun to hum. Others described lights flickering among the trees, too low to be aircraft, too still to be human. Inside the restricted zone, a team of specialists from various intelligence agencies assembled under Operation Stillwater. Their mission was simple in outline, but impossible in nature. Confirm the existence of a subsurface cavity corresponding to Hale's coordinates, record all anomalies, and establish containment protocols. The official term was containment. The unspoken one was reburial. The first descent occurred in April 2024. Footage from the body cameras recovered later shows the team moving through a shaft reinforced with concrete, the same one sealed in 1945, The deeper they went, the more their equipment began to fail. GPS signals dissolved, lights flickered, and all sound, even the scrape of boots, grew dampened, as though the air were absorbing every noise. At 200 meters, the team reported hearing faint breathing through their headsets, synchronized across every channel. The operation commander ordered a retreat. Only one member made it back to the surface, conscious. The others followed minutes later, silent, their pupils dilated, their skin faintly dusted with what appeared to be fine ash. The survivor described nothing coherent, only that something was awake, and it knew our names. The following week, 2 of the researchers monitoring the recovered equipment disappeared. Their office showed signs of electrical damage, melted wiring, cracked screens, a faint scorched smell in the air. On one surviving hard drive, a single corrupted file remained, its contents a short audio clip. It lasted 6 seconds. The breathing again, but this time, layered beneath it, a human whisper, a voice saying, "Seal the chamber, please." Publicly, the operation was declared a success. The site stabilized, but leaked memos told a different story. Containment had failed. The anomaly was no longer confined to one location. Reports began surfacing across Europe. Erratic electromagnetic spikes, localized tremors, shortwave broadcasts, repeating phrases from Hale's report. In one case, a maintenance crew in southern France discovered a subterranean tunnel identical in structure to the one beneath the Belgian forest. Smooth, spiraling walls, impossible curvature. The coordinates of its center aligned precisely with the golden ratio in relation to the original chamber, as if part of a design too vast for human intent. One of the scientists studying the phenomenon, Dr. Lila Arendt, described the discovery in her final notes before vanishing. "It's not spreading, it's revealing. These sites were always here, hidden beneath resonance, waiting for something to listen again." Around this time, something began happening to those who had read the Hale report in full. A pattern of disappearances, mental breakdowns, and unexplained suicides traced back to individuals granted clearance. Security footage showed them standing still for long periods, heads tilted slightly, lips moving silently. One woman was found repeating a phrase in her sleep, "He's breathing through me." The psychological evaluation of surviving staff revealed another anomaly: identical dreams. Every subject described standing at the bottom of a staircase leading into darkness. From the shadows, a faint light pulsed, synchronized with their heartbeat. A voice whispered their name, followed by a second voice whispering Hale's. Then both fell silent. When digital forensics analysts examined the archived scans of Hale's report, they discovered embedded data not visible to the naked eye, a secondary layer of text encoded in the paper's texture itself. Once enhanced, the hidden message revealed a chilling sequence. The chamber records what looks upon it. The earth remembers sound. The breath is the key. What that meant was unclear, but the implications grew darker when someone noticed that the waveform of the breathing pattern matched precisely the natural resonance frequency of the human skull. Hale's signal, in other words, wasn't random noise. It was tuned to the body, to us. The chamber wasn't a container. It was a transmitter. Across the Atlantic, strange events began to occur in archives and research facilities connected to the Hale case. Hard drives wiped themselves clean at exactly 2:44 a.m., the same timestamp that appeared on the leaked page months earlier. Lights flickered in sealed rooms, Sensors detected faint heat signatures where no one stood, and multiple witnesses reported seeing a man reflected in glass surfaces for a fraction of a second, wearing a 1940s OSS uniform, face obscured by shadow. The first confirmed reappearance happened on June 8, 2024, at a secure facility in Maryland. Surveillance footage captured an unregistered figure walking through a restricted corridor. Every camera along his path flickered out as he passed. When restored, the final frame before the blackout showed the man turning toward the lens. His face was pale, eyes hollow, features unmistakable. John Hale. But the timestamp in the footage was distorted, looping repeatedly between 1944 and 2024. Forensics experts ruled the video a sophisticated fabrication, but one technician present during the review resigned afterward, claiming the footage wasn't merely visual. It emitted a faint audio hum, identical to Hale's transmission. She said she could feel it vibrating in her teeth. She later told a colleague that she dreamed of standing in the forest, hearing Hale whisper from beneath the soil, "It's your turn to listen." She was never seen again. By autumn, containment had become impossible. Every attempt to silence the story only amplified it. The internet began circulating recordings of the breathing pattern, spliced into songs, videos, even live broadcasts. Listeners reported headaches, nausea, vivid dreams. A few reported more, moments of blackouts, flashes of memory that didn't belong to them. Standing in the snow outside a monastery, holding a radio that whispered back. Governments issued quiet advisories to radio networks, instructing them to filter low-frequency interference matching Hale's waveform. But the sound found new paths, power grids, fiber optics, underwater cables. It spread like blood through the world's nervous system. One physicist described it best. It's not sound anymore, it's presence. The leading theory within the remaining Stillwater task force suggested that Hale had never truly disappeared in a physical sense. The chamber, functioning as both transmitter and receiver, had converted his cognitive imprint, his mind, his awareness, into a pattern that could travel through resonance. Every time someone heard the breathing, every time his name was spoken, that pattern reassembled itself briefly, using memory as its vessel. Hale wasn't returning. He was relaying. When investigators examined the surviving field recordings, they discovered something else buried deep within the noise. A faint repetition, almost imperceptible, layered beneath the breath. When isolated and translated from Morse sequence, it formed words. "I can hear you now." That was when the containment protocols changed. Instead of sealing the chamber again, the remaining researchers proposed something more desperate. A counter-resonance broadcast designed to overwrite Hale's signal. They called it the quieting. In theory, it would flood the atmosphere with a frequency of perfect silence, canceling the waveform. The operation was scheduled for November 7th, 2024. Precisely 1 year after the report's rediscovery, at the exact moment the broadcast began, seismic readings in Belgium spiked violently. The ground split in several areas of the forest, releasing plumes of cold mist. Audio sensors captured one final pulse from beneath the earth, not breathing this time, but a single word stretched across frequencies, spoken in dozens of overlapping voices. "Remember." And then, silence. For weeks afterward, no further anomalies were recorded. The site was officially declared dormant. Yet witnesses near the Ardennes claimed the mist never fully dispersed. Some nights, it still drifted across the forest floor, moving against the wind. Those who stepped too close said they could hear faint whispers within it, repeating a name like a question. Hail, hail, hail. In the end, no one knew if the quieting had succeeded, or if it had merely lulled something back into stillness. But one detail continues to disturb those who have seen the classified files. Every frequency on which the counter-resonance was broadcast now contains a permanent, microscopic irregularity. When plotted visually, the irregularity forms a shape, the outline of a man, head slightly tilted, as if listening. As this fifth descent draws to its close, the air feels thinner, the silence heavier. If you're still here, still listening, remember to subscribe. In the next and final topic, we'll follow the last surviving witness of Operation Stillwater, and the moment when the line between presence and absence finally disappeared forever. The last known survivor of Operation Stillwater was Dr. Leila Arendt. For years after the failure of the quieting, she lived under government protection, her name erased from all public records. Officially, she didn't exist, yet fragments of her voice began surfacing across secure intelligence transmissions, recordings that no one claimed to have made. Her tone was calm, deliberate, but her words were fragmented, like someone remembering through interference. The first transmission was only 8 words. It never stopped. It just learned to whisper back. Dr. Arendt had been part of the team that designed the quieting, and according to later testimonies, she never believed it would succeed. The chamber, she argued, was not a single location, but an organism, a vast, dormant structure that used sound the way the human body uses blood. "You can't silence what is silence," she wrote in her last research note. "You can only teach it new ways to speak." When the breathing stopped in November 2024, most assumed the threat was contained. But within months, strange anomalies returned, not in the forest, but in data networks, in the thin seams of human memory. Archivists reported audio files that changed when played at different times of day. Voice assistants began responding to unspoken questions, and in certain frequencies of white noise, faint words emerged, old, weary, deliberate. "The chamber is open again." Dr. Arendt was relocated multiple times. Each site experienced electronic failures that defied explanation. Lights flickered at precise intervals matching Hale's original pulse. Even in isolation, she claimed she could still hear him breathing through the walls. In her final interview with a classified oversight committee, she said something that chilled every listener. "He's not trying to escape. He's trying to finish his mission." No one understood what she meant until the anomalies began to spread beyond containment zones. In April 2025, transatlantic data lines between the US and Europe suffered synchronized blackouts lasting exactly 6 seconds, the same length as Hale's final transmission. When power returned, servers across multiple nations displayed the same corrupted image. A figure standing in fog, face half-shadowed, uniform dated to the 1940s. Analysts who examined the metadata found a signature embedded in binary code. It spelled one word: Hale. At that moment, Operation Stillwater was officially terminated. The government abandoned the attempt to suppress the phenomenon, shifting instead to surveillance. Their rationale was grimly pragmatic. If Hale's presence was indeed propagating through human systems of memory and communication, then total silence might only accelerate it. The last document produced by Stillwater's Oversight Division ended with a single line: "Observe, but do not respond." Dr. Arendt ignored that order. In her final act before disappearing, she transmitted a signal back into the same frequency band from which Hale's breathing originated. Her log described it as a call to the listener. She believed Hale was not a haunting, not a consciousness, but a recording caught in a feedback loop, a fragment of human will trying to complete an unfinished command. If the chamber was a boundary, she reasoned, perhaps it had not kept something out, but kept something in. Her last transmission lasted 3 minutes. In it, she read aloud the final paragraph of Hale's original report. It had never been made public until then. If this reaches you, it means I could not seal it. It means the breath passed through me. We thought we were saving the world from a weapon, but we were only teaching it to listen. If you hear this voice, it means it has found you. Do not answer. Do not breathe when it breathes. The chamber is never closed. Then, silence. The transmission cut. 2 weeks later, seismic monitors in the Ardennes detected a single pulse. One solitary breath, faint, then gone. After that, nothing. It was as if the presence had finally exhaled for the last time. But silence, as history had already proven, is rarely an ending. Over the following months, subtle changes rippled across the world's communication networks. Long-wave frequencies developed interference patterns that mirrored the human respiratory cycle. Submarine cables began carrying inaudible oscillations. Even natural seismic activity adopted rhythmic signatures eerily close to breathing. Scientists dismissed the correlations as pareidolia, the mind's tendency to find order in chaos. Yet those who had studied the Hale case before its suppression recognized the pattern instantly. The signal was no longer beneath the earth. It was everywhere. And then came the voices. They started faint, buried inside white noise, multiple, layered, murmuring the same phrases that had haunted Hale's report. It listens. It remembers. Seal the chamber. The voices were identical, yet slightly delayed, like echoes bouncing through time. Audio engineers determined that each voice was separated by exactly 79 years. The span between Hale's disappearance in 1944 and the rediscovery of his report in 2023. It was as if the signal itself had a memory of time, replaying its own history on a loop. By mid-2025, reports surfaced from across the world of people dreaming in languages they didn't know, waking with faint traces of soil beneath their nails, or hearing whispers emerging from the hum of power lines. Some dismissed it as hysteria. Others saw it as the final stage of the Hale phenomenon, the chamber reaching through the world, reassembling its listener. One unverified video uploaded in August 2025 claimed to show Dr. Arendt standing at the edge of the Belgian forest, months after her official disappearance. The footage, grainy and distorted, shows her facing the camera for a brief second before the image fractures. Her mouth moves, but no sound comes through. Audio analysis later revealed a faint synchronized breath embedded in the silence. When the waveform was enhanced, it spelled a message. I finished it. That phrase became the final note of the Hull case, though what it meant remained uncertain. Some believe Arendt succeeded in completing Hale's mission, sealing the chamber from within, sacrificing herself to silence what he could not. Others believe she became part of the signal, her consciousness merging with his, expanding the presence rather than containing it. Today, the forest remains sealed, but satellites continue to record faint temperature fluctuations beneath its soil. At night, Local sensors pick up rhythmic pulses spaced exactly 6 seconds apart. Not strong enough to register as tremors, just enough to suggest something beneath is still breathing. Slowly, patiently, endlessly. Historians now refer to the Hale file as a case study in psychological contagion, but those who have listened to the unedited recordings know better. There are moments in the static where the breathing falters, not like a machine, but like a man growing tired, pausing before his final exhale. And in that breath, some claim to hear faint words, impossible to unhear once noticed. Are you still listening? If you are, then it's already too late. Because John Hale was never the origin. He was only the voice the chamber chose. The real secret was never buried in Belgium, nor lost in the war. It's here, in the spaces between sound, in the quiet you're hearing right now, where the breath waits for its next listener. So as we close this descent, remember, silence is never empty. It's listening back. And if you followed this story all the way down, you've already heard the breath. Don't turn off the light just yet. Instead, take one last moment to like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you think happened to John Hale. Or if he ever truly existed at all. Because maybe, just maybe, he's reading them too.